15 years of marriage. 15 years of unwavering dedication to my career. 15 years of proving to myself that I was far more capable than people once believed. Yet in all that time, I never imagined my past would resurface in the most unexpected way. Rachel and I arrived at the Grand Arcadia Hotel's ballroom, where Young Tech Corp was celebrating its 50th anniversary. As I stepped out of the car, I adjusted my tie, a small gesture of reassurance. Rachel, as graceful as ever, emerged in a champagne-colored dress that shimmered under the golden entry lights. She looked poised, confident, completely unaware of the storm about to unfold. The ballroom buzzed with energy. Well-dressed executives, investors, and professionals moved through the space, exchanging firm handshakes and polite laughter. The soft clinking of glasses filled the air, marking the significance of the occasion. I was preparing to greet a senior board member when I heard a voice I hadn't thought about in years. A voice once laced with arrogance and superiority. A voice that had once made me feel small. I turned, and there she was. Olivia. The last time I saw her, she had walked out of our tiny apartment, leaving behind nothing but a bitter farewell and an air of self-importance. Now she stood before me, dressed in a sleek black ensemble, exuding the same polished professionalism. But her eyes, those hadn't changed. They still carried that same smugness. Beside her stood a man who looked like he had stepped straight out of a corporate magazine. Tall, well-groomed, and just as arrogant as Olivia. Without even acknowledging my presence, he handed her a drink. Olivia smirked, saying my name, as if it were a relic from a life she had long since left behind. "I can't believe you're here," she said, amusement flickering in her tone. Rachel, always my pillar since the tension. Without a word, she stood by my side, her fingers brushing against mine in quiet reassurance. Olivia chuckled. "I assumed you'd still be working in some factory or trade job. I didn't expect to see you at an event like this. Or are you just someone's plus one, maybe working the event?" She still thought time had stood still, that I was the same person she had left behind. The man beside her, her husband Nathan, finally spoke, his voice dripping with condescension. "It takes a lot of work to keep things running in a corporation like this. Not everyone is cut out for it." They were enjoying their sense of superiority, convinced that I was still struggling, still clawing my way up some impossible ladder. I let the moment stretch before responding. I spoke. "Han's unemployment begins tomorrow." Silence. The words hung in the air like a storm cloud. Olivia blinked, her confident smirk slipping. Nathan's amusement faltered. "Excuse me," she scoffed. "Michael, are you serious? Do you even understand what you're saying?" Nathan chuckled, shaking his head. "This guy has jokes." Rachel, ever composed, simply smiled. She knew. I shrugged, adjusting my cufflinks. "I suppose tomorrow will be the first time we all find out." For the first time that evening, Olivia was no longer in control of the conversation. And judging by the tension in Nathan's jaw, he knew it too. I hadn't always been the man standing in that grand ballroom, holding my wife's hand. My journey had been long. It had been brutal, but every step had led me here. And now Olivia and Nathan were about to realize just how far I had come. MK whispered, her voice trembling. "You're lying." I smiled and stood up. A moment later, a voice echoed through the speakers. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are honored to introduce the new leader of one of the industry's most promising companies. Please welcome Michael Carter, President and CEO." Nathan froze. The color drained from his face, his arrogance replaced by sheer disbelief. I turned away from them without another word and walked toward the stage. As I ascended, applause erupted. I could feel their stunned, speechless gazes fixed on me, but I didn't look back. I didn't need to. The applause grew louder as top executives, investors, and respected industry leaders turned to face me. I straightened my tie and stepped forward, each movement carrying a quiet authority. Faint whispers filled the room. Hushed voices of admiration, surprise, and recognition. For a brief moment, I imagined Olivia standing frozen, her carefully crafted illusion of superiority crumbling before her. Nathan, his breath caught in his throat, the weight of realization pressing down on him. Finally understanding what I had meant. The arrogance he had worn like armor shattered. He wasn't talking to a factory worker. He wasn't talking to Olivia's ex-boyfriend. He was talking to his boss. No, he was talking to the man in charge. I approached the podium, adjusted the microphone, and let the room settle. Good evening, everyone. My voice carried effortlessly through the space. I would like to thank you all for joining us in celebrating Young Tech's 50th anniversary. A warm round of applause followed. I nodded in appreciation before continuing. This company began with modest beginnings, built on innovation and commitment, on the belief that perseverance and creativity could take us farther than we ever imagined. For a brief moment, my gaze fell on Nathan and Olivia. They were motionless, their faces pale. I know this because I experienced it myself. A hush fell over the room. When I first entered this industry, I wasn't sitting in an office wearing a suit. I was on the production floor. I learned from the ground up, not just how to build a product, but how to build a company. Several senior executives nodded, those who had been with Young Tech long enough to know my story. They understood I wasn't just another CEO in a boardroom. I had earned my place. I let a pause linger, then smiled faintly before delivering the final blow. And that is why I take leadership extremely seriously. I believe this company's core values, integrity, respect, and dedication to excellence, must be upheld by all who represent it. Another silence. Time for the final strike. That I have a crucial announcement before we continue tonight's festivities. I turned slightly, addressing the entire room, but my words were meant for one man. Starting tomorrow, the corporate strategy department will have a new chief. A wave of gasps rippled through the audience. A single name whispered across the room. Nathan Reynolds. His tenure was over. I caught a glimpse of him stumbling back a step, his hands gripping the back of a chair, as if he had suddenly lost the strength to stand. His face drained of all color. Beside him, Olivia's jaw fell open, her panic unmistakable. She turned to Nathan, searching for something, anything, that could make this better. But there was nothing. Nathan was finished. The arrogant smile that had adorned his face the entire evening had vanished. In its place was pure, unfiltered disbelief. His jaw tightened, his fists clenched. He was trying desperately to maintain his composure. But I was calm, unbothered. Because this wasn't revenge. This was justice. I continued addressing the crowd, seamlessly transitioning into the next part of the evening, acknowledging my team, discussing Young Tech's future, and expressing gratitude to those who had shaped this company. Nathan, the moment I stepped off that stage, whispers spread like wildfire. Executives exchanged glances. The entire atmosphere of the room had shifted. I barely had time to finish my champagne before I felt him storm toward me. Gone was the smug condescension. In its place, desperation. "You can't do this," he hissed, his voice low and frantic. His hands trembled. "I have a contract." I tilted my head. "You have nothing." Nathan blinked, stunned by my indifference. I continued, my voice unwavering. "Your contract is subject to review. You've mistreated employees, disregarded policies, and underperformed on key objectives. Should I go on?" His nostrils flared. He had no defense. Then Olivia stepped in. "Michael," she purred, attempting a smile. "Let's be reasonable. We've been friends for years. Maybe we can work something out." I met her gaze, unimpressed. "I don't do business with people who despise me." Her smile wavered. Coolly, I added, "You made your decision a long time ago." For the first time that night, her polished mask cracked. She had walked away from me all those years ago, believing I would never amount to anything. Now, she was watching her past mistake unfold before her, unable to stop it. Nathan's chest rose and fell rapidly. He could feel the eyes of the entire ballroom on him. He could hear the whispers, since the judgment realized, too late, that his fall was happening in real time. "You think this makes you better than me?" he spat bitterly. I grinned. "No, Nathan. I don't." Then I turned and walked away. Because men like him? They weren't worth my time. Nathan had spent years at the top, surrounded by people who fed his ego, convinced that his rank made him untouchable. But power isn't about status. Power is about building, innovating, leading. And Nathan had done none of those things. As I continued shaking hands with investors, Nathan stood in the middle of the ballroom, drowning in public shame. By the time I left the party, Nathan Reynolds was no longer relevant. His career crumbled overnight. The same investors and executives he once bragged about knowing wouldn't return his calls. His luxury lifestyle? Gone. His expensive car? Sold. His high-rise apartment? Foreclosed. He had built nothing. And when everything was taken away, he had nothing left. As for Olivia, she tried to latch onto another rich man. But in business circles, her name had become a joke. And me, I kept building. Because I never needed revenge. I had already won.